A heat index of 107 degrees is baking central Iowa, which means dangerous conditions for millions. 31 states are locked inside this heat dome, which means no real relief is anywhere close. 3 firefighters are confirmed dead after a burnover event on the Utah-Colorado border today. That is 3 separate weather disasters hitting the United States at the exact same moment today. A record heat dome, a deadly wildfire, and a severe outbreak are all going at once out there. The story behind all 3 of these events is far more layered than most weather reports cover. The real driver here is a buckled jet stream, which means opposite weather extremes exist side by side. That jet stream is bent into a massive ridge, which means weather systems are pinned in place. On its eastern flank, it pumps Gulf moisture northward, which means the heat dome stays fully locked. On its western side, it drags Arctic air from Canada, which means mountain snow falls in late June, right in the collision zone. Severe thunderstorms are firing today, which means multiple states face severe risk. This is a setup where 2 opposite weather extremes exist almost side by side on the same map. Meteorologists call this a split flow pattern, which means the weather looks completely different region to region. These buckled setups hold for many days, which means no quick resolution is coming anytime soon. The heat side starts in Iowa, where an extreme heat warning is in effect, which means stay inside. The NWS Des Moines issued that warning through Wednesday night, which means several more dangerous days ahead. Central Iowa heat index values are expected to top 107 degrees, which means brutal afternoon conditions. Dale, a retired electrician from Toledo, Ohio, is watching this heat dome push closer to his neighborhood. He says his block already scrapped a cookout. Nobody is messing with this kind of dangerous heat. Toledo sits in the marginal storm zone tonight, but the heat is the real story in that corridor. Every major model agrees this dome holds through the 4th of July, which means 10 more brutal days. That means relief for the Midwest and Ohio Valley will not arrive until after the 4th of July. Des Moines, Sioux City, Omaha, and Kansas City are all running well above 105 heat index. Memphis, Nashville, and Louisville are tracking heat indices from 105 to 108 degrees. Indianapolis is under a heat advisory, which means heat index values there could top 108. Marion, Hamilton, and Boone counties in Indiana are taking the brunt, which means local warnings are in effect. Springfield, Illinois, and St. Louis are deep inside this dome, which means no cooling on the forecast horizon. The overnight low is the most dangerous part of any heat event, and tonight it is not dropping. When lows stay above 75, the body cannot recover, which means heat illness risk stays elevated all night. That trapped overnight heat turns a hot stretch into a dangerous situation, which means extra vigilance is needed. The elderly, children, and outdoor workers face the highest risk, which means checking on loved ones matters. The NWS urges everyone to limit strenuous outdoor activity, which means save the hard work for cooler hours. The Gulf Coast from Louisiana through Mississippi and Alabama is deep inside this dome, which means no escape. New Orleans and Baton Rouge are running above 105 heat index, which means extreme conditions apply. Margaret, a retired nurse from Lake Charles, Louisiana, has lived through plenty of tough Gulf summers. But she says this stretch hits different. The humidity is stacking right on top of record afternoon heat. Dew points in the mid-70s mixing with air temps near 100 push the heat index off the charts. The NWS New Orleans extended heat alerts through Thursday, which means the Gulf Coast faces more danger days. Outdoor camps and youth events across the Gulf are getting canceled one after another in the heat. Keep the AC running, drink fluids, and check on neighbors, which means making heat safety your daily routine. Heat stroke can develop fast. Call 911 the moment you see confusion or a person stops sweating. That covers the heat side, a massive footprint across 31 states, and no end in sight for now. Anyone on this map today needs to take this heat seriously. It is not your average summer afternoon. 107 degrees, 31 states, 3 firefighters. Those 3 numbers still define the full story. Now pivoting to the tornado side, because this severe risk is every bit as urgent as the heat. And what the Storm Prediction Center is showing over the Dakotas today demands serious attention. An enhanced risk of severe thunderstorms has been issued for eastern North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota. Enhanced is level 3 of 5 on the SPC scale, which means organized severe weather is expected today. The enhanced zone covers 485,000 people, which means nearly 500,000 face severe risk. Fargo, Grand Forks, and Moorhead are in that enhanced bullseye, which means tornado warnings are possible tonight. The atmosphere across eastern North Dakota is absolutely loaded, which means supercell development is expected this afternoon. Storm relative helicity runs 200 to 300 meters per second, which means the atmosphere is primed to rotate. Those helicity values support rotating supercells, which means tornado potential is on the table tonight. The SPC is showing a 10% tornado probability across eastern North Dakota and northwestern Minnesota. 10% over 500,000 people is serious exposure, which means those communities will feel this. Frank, a retired teacher from Springfield, Illinois, always watches the radar on nights that look like this. He says this setup has the same feel as nights when you wake up to wind damage reports. Solid advice for anyone in the Dakotas or northern Iowa tonight: do not sleep on this storm system. Large hail, destructive gusts, and tornadoes are expected this afternoon, which means multiple hazard types are in play. The slight risk zone is much larger. It pulls in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Duluth, and Sioux Falls in total. About 6,600,000 people fall inside the slight risk area today, stretching into Iowa. As those cells grow up scale into an MCS, wind gusts could approach 70 to 80 miles per hour. Bismarck, North Dakota's in the corridor too, which means the whole state is watching the sky tonight. The SPC expanded the 10% tornado contour this afternoon, which means the setup keeps intensifying. Near Fargo or Grand Forks. Have multiple warning paths tonight app, NOAA radio, and trusted neighbors. Know your shelter plan before storms arrive. Tornadoes spin up fast in setups exactly like this one. Anyone driving through the Dakotas today should keep a radar app open and have a clear shelter plan. The slight risk extends through Wisconsin and the upper Midwest, which means damaging wind is the main concern. Minneapolis, St. Paul is inside the slight risk, which means metro residents need to stay weather aware tonight. Anyone in Minnesota or Wisconsin tonight should treat this as a serious threat, not a passing shower. Now shifting to the west, because the fire situation out there is genuinely alarming at this hour. The Snyder Fire has erupted along the Utah-Colorado border and has already burned 28,000 acres. 28,000 acres is roughly the footprint of a mid-sized city, and it is still spreading fast. 3 firefighters died when this fire shifted direction, which means even trained crews had no time to react. A burnover happens when fire shifts direction fast, which means crews can be trapped with almost no warning. Dry conditions and erratic wind shifts created the exact circumstances, which means this fire was unpredictable today. The NWS Pueblo posted a red flag warning for Colorado through Wednesday, which means fire danger persists. Relative humidity in some Colorado fire zones is dropping as low as 6% today. 6% humidity is wild. Any spark or gust can turn a manageable fire into an inferno fast. Wind gusts of 45 miles per hour are forecast for the fire weather zones across Colorado today. Earl, a retired rancher from western South Dakota, knows what red flag conditions mean for livestock and land. He says when the wind picks up and humidity drops, a fire can go catastrophic in minutes. Anyone near the Snyder Fire Zone should not ignore evacuation orders. Get out early if told to leave. 107. 31 states. 3 dead firefighters. That means 3 separate crises are all active today. Add deadly flooding to the list, because the collision zone has already struck parts of Kentucky hard. 4 people lost their lives to flash flooding in Kentucky, which means a statewide emergency was declared. He says those Kentucky hollows fill up way too fast for people to react without advance warning. Kentucky's governor declared a statewide emergency declaration, which means resources are now flowing to those counties. Canyon County, Idaho, near Nampa and Caldwell, also declared an emergency after a severe storm swept through. Idaho crews are handling storm damage there, which means their resources are stretched thin across the state. That pattern of generating simultaneous emergencies means agencies at every level are stretched dangerously thin tonight. That collision zone between the heat dome and Arctic air keeps spinning up dangerous convective events daily. Models show that collision zone tracking eastward, which means the severe risk zone shifts east with it. Communities in the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes need to stay alert for another storm round by midweek. Severe weather operations are ongoing in multiple states, which means this story is far from over tonight. Share your city below and we will pull the latest local forecast data for you tonight. Jumping ahead to tomorrow, since day 2 brings its own severe threat into the northeast region. The SPC has posted a slight risk for parts of northern New York and Vermont for Tuesday. That slight risk covers about 3.5 million people, which means major metro areas are included. Albany, Schenectady, Utica, Troy, and Burlington, Vermont are all inside the Day 2 slight risk zone. The setup involves enhanced northwesterly flow aloft on the edge of that same amplified upper ridge. A low-level jet across Ontario and Quebec will push shear to 40-plus knots, which means severe risk grows. Most guidance shows convection organizing into bowing clusters by late afternoon, which means widespread wind damage is likely. Damaging wind gusts will be the primary hazard as bow echoes push through the Hudson and Mohawk valleys. Sandra, a retired librarian from Alexandria, Virginia, says her family in upstate New York is tracking this. But a couple of tornadoes are possible if a more discrete storm mode develops earlier in the day. A 5% tornado probability in the New York and Vermont corridor is notable for a Day 2 outlook. Rochester, Syracuse, Albany, and Schenectady fall in the broader 2% tornado zone for Tuesday. That 2% zone covers 5,600,000 people, which means a wide swath faces risk. She says they know afternoon severe weather up there, but this particular setup looks more serious. For folks along the I-87 and I-90 corridors, afternoon storms could be impactful and arrive fast tomorrow. The timing looks to be mid-afternoon through early evening, which lines up with the commute window. Southern New England and the mid-Atlantic should see the severe risk drop off toward the coast by evening. The Northeast is not the only Day 2 story. Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula are in play too. A slight risk is up for northern Wisconsin and the Upper Peninsula of Michigan for Tuesday. That threat is driven by an upper low tracking east from the Canadian prairies into northern Minnesota. The surface boundary stretches from the Minnesota Arrowhead through eastern Nebraska, which means a long clash zone exists. South of that boundary, low 70s dew points are building a moist air mass, which means extreme instability ahead. Guidance shows extreme instability north of that line, which means an MCS could develop rapidly. Damaging winds near 80 miles per hour are possible with any Boeing MCS across the Great Lakes region. The Central Plains slight risk brings supercells capable of large hail, which means Tuesday afternoon looks active. High base storms in Nebraska and South Dakota could produce large to very large hail this Tuesday afternoon. 107 degrees, 31 states, 3 firefighters, and now add winter storm warnings to the list. Winter storm warnings have been issued for the Idaho and Montana mountains, which means travel hazards are real. Not a typo, winter storm warnings are posted in late June because of that deep western trough overhead. At elevations above 6,000 feet, temperatures drop below freezing, which means real snowfall is accumulating. Mountain passes in Idaho and Montana have measurable snow on the ground, which means travel could be hazardous. Sub-freezing air aloft hitting high terrain squeezes out moisture as snow, which means June snowfall in the mountains. It stops you cold, snow-capped peaks in late June, while the Midwest bakes hundreds of miles away. This is that same Arctic air mass locked on the western flank of that buckled jet stream overhead. Mountain snow and a 107-degree heat index in Iowa happening simultaneously across this one country. That split tells you everything about how extreme and locked in this atmospheric pattern really is. Looking ahead, this overall pattern is not moving for at least another week by any major model. The heat dome holds through the 4th of July, which means the holiday will not bring any relief. Forecasters are calling this high pressure persistent and entrenched, which means the heat dome is not moving soon. Heat indices near or above 100 degrees are forecast every single day, which means the holiday suffers. That cumulative heat stress is straight up what leads to health crises in communities without cooling options. Severe weather chances keep cycling across the plains and upper Midwest, which means no clear break is ahead. Each shortwave rotating through taps that massive instability, which means a new round of storms fires up. Out west, fire danger stays critical through Wednesday, which means red flag conditions hold in Colorado. Snyder fire crews ask everyone to respect evacuation orders, which means stay completely clear of the fire zone. This is a serious multi-hazard event, which means every community in these zones deserves full weather coverage. Share your city below and we will get you the latest data for your area tonight. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update when things change on this map. They will. This is one of the most complex weather patterns the country has dealt with in a long time. Heat is the silent killer. Fire is moving fast. And the Dakota atmosphere is primed and loaded. 3 separate crises, 3 different causes, all tracing back to one buckled and locked-in jet stream. The Day 2 northeast threat and the June mountain snow make this already surreal map even more extreme. Every headline on today's weather map traces back to that same atmospheric setup sitting right overhead. We came into this forecast with 3 numbers, and those same numbers close the story out tonight. 107 degrees, that heat index is still baking the Midwest with no break before the 4th. 31 states still under this dome tonight, which means there is no cooler escape anywhere nearby. 3 firefighters lost their lives today on the Utah-Colorado fire line. That loss belongs to all of us. 107 degrees, 31 states, 3 firefighters.